Certainly, there's an imbalance in Israel, as in many places in the world. We need to go back to principles. And I urge the President Trump's administration to use those principles of just war theory. If someone bashes in your door, you don't take a machete and behead them. In some ways, it's common sense. If someone slaps you, you don't shoot them. If someone drops a bomb, you don't just obliterate them. Christ calls us to love our enemies. One of the best ways, I believe, to love our enemies is always to bring the truth. And the truth is, no nation has the right to just wantonly come in and destroy another, to be that final spark. And if we look at those historic moments, the restraint goes away because people are pissed.
By the way, my name is Joe McClane. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Speaking of headlines, here's a couple you should consider. Out of the AP, UN agency closes its remaining Gaza bakeries as food supplies dwindle under Israeli blockade. They're not letting any food in. They said you've got plenty, but they're starving there now. Let that sink in. Here's another one out of the Epic Times. Israel to expand military operations and seize large areas of the Gaza Strip. I've said it's been a land grab for a long time. Apparently, the Epic Times seems to agree with me. There is an open letter over at the Substack. We're going to link to it. Bishop Joseph Strickland on Substack has written an open letter to Donald Trump about the actions of the Israeli government in this conflict, which is complicated to say the least. He joins us this morning to discuss it. Your Excellency, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joe.
So take us through your letter. What did you say to President Trump? I mean, you were just in Mar-a-Lago not a couple of weeks back. So why the open letter? What are you trying to say?
Well, the heart and the main message that I wanted to repeat is really focusing on principles, the principles that are laid down in the just war theory that for centuries has guided the church to, yes, sometimes these conflicts are sadly necessary in the sense of bringing a balance of justice. And certainly there's an imbalance in Israel, as in many places in the world. I don't claim to know, as you said, it's a very complex situation. And to me, that means for all the more reasons, we need to go back to principles. And I urge the President Trump's administration to use those principles of just war theory to really look closely at what they're doing and what they're supporting. It's too easy for all of us, whether it's something in our families or a local issue in our town or in our state or our nation. It's easy to let emotion, to let politics, to let all kinds of other factors intervene. And especially when it comes to a situation like is unfolding still in Israel, we need basic principles of protecting innocent citizens and doing our best to avoid harming them, making sure that our actions are not some sort of heavy-handed use of power to gain more power, but instead are seeking to balance the justice equation when it's out of balance. So the just war theory, those principles, I think are extremely important, and we need to return to them constantly as, I know, difficult decisions are being made, but I urge the Trump administration to use those principles for guidance.
I've talked to Catholics about this, and I was surprised that many Catholics think that the Israeli government is justified because their citizens were attacked. Their children were taken. Some are still being held captive. They were raped and abused and mutilated and executed viciously by the terrorists. And therefore, they're now okay. Like, in other words, I think a lot of people believe that if someone were to come and attack my family, I would be justified in doing whatever I needed to do to make that right. But you're saying that the just war theory says, no, we have to be restrained and regulated when it comes to violence. It's not an eye for an eye.
Absolutely. And I think restraint is the main question. I think sometimes, and like I said, I don't claim to be a statesman that understands all the complexities, but for all the more reason for all of us and for those statesmen that are making difficult decisions to always have an attitude of restraint, not doing more than we have to do. It's like, I very often in these global issues or national issues, the best way I can understand it is to bring it down to simpler terms, more local, basically using the principle of subsidiarity. Really, the just war theory writ large is the idea that, yes, self-defense is moral. As Christians, we don't just have to roll over and allow ourselves or our families or our home to be attacked. So, yes, it was proper, I believe, and I think the just war theory supports Israel responding, but just, again, bringing it to the local level. If someone bashes in your door, you don't take a machete and behead them. That's not a restrained response. And I think that's and I'm not making accusations. I really don't know enough to see where the restraint needs to be. But my main purpose was to remind the Trump administration and hopefully others as well. They're certainly not the only players in all of this. And a lack of restraint is something that I think we always have to be very cautious about, because all the things that the just war theory talks about to guard against it escalating and becoming a humanitarian crisis, all of those pressure points we've seen civilians harmed on both sides of this. And when that starts to happen, restraint goes away. Just like, again, bringing it to the home. You have a family with children. I know most of them are grown, if not all, but you know what it is to be a father caring for your family. If someone came in and just started beating your youngest child, for you to be a father that just stands by and says, well, I'm a pacifist, that isn't what Christ calls us to. That isn't our faith. But to then go out and take a machine gun to that person's family, that is not restraint. So again, we just, in some ways, is common sense. If someone slaps you, you don't shoot them. If someone drops a bomb, you don't just obliterate them with bombs indiscriminately destroying everything, just like it's a scorched earth policy. That's been done in history, but that doesn't make it moral.
I've often thought about this in those very terms that you just mentioned about home defense and protecting my family. How prepared am I to meet the threat that comes to the door, right? And I thought about this because we live in the great state of the People's Republic of Texas. So, everybody has an arsenal here in Texas. But if I were to meet that threat with, say, an AR platform, 223 round or whatever, that round's traveling, pretty fast, 2,700 feet per second minimum. It's probably going to go through, the neighbor's wall. And what happens then? What's the ramifications of that, versus, say, using birdshot or 22 or some other type of round that's less likely to have other damage? I think that's part of the equation here is we have to be thinking about our actions and responses well before the moment comes, or else we don't think at all. We're in the heat of the moment and we just act in our disordered passions. Whereas we've now seen months and months, years of this, and leveling Gaza City, starving these people to death, treating every citizen there as though they are terrorists, when clearly not all of them are terrorists, seems completely disproportionate. Yet our government consistently sides with Israel, no matter, like it's a blank check. Whatever you want to do, here, we'll even pitch in some of the money. Here you go. Where is Donald Trump has taken millions of dollars from lobbyists during his campaign so he could be elected president of this country again. Those lobbyists want him to support Israel at all costs. How do we get him to see reason in this?
Well, I think we just have to keep speaking up and reminding him that, yes, there are lobbyists, but there are a lot of citizens who made that choice to elect him over not a very good choice on the other hand, but we need him to do his very best. And as you're talking, Joe, it reminds me that the reality is even, we have to keep morality in the picture. But even without that, just a wanton chess game, if that's all that people are approaching it as, it's not smart to hit someone harder than is absolutely necessary, because then what's going to happen in retaliation?
Right.
They're going to hit you back in a way that's harder than necessary. And escalation is one of the chief problems that the just war theory, it's not a magic formula, but it's a reasoned moral approach to addressing very difficult decisions and very difficult situations. And as you pointed out, Joe, in the heat of the moment, I'm not a father of children, but I love children. I love families. And I can imagine if you see someone with your eyes, if you are an eyewitness to some kind of brutal attack, it's going to get your heart pumping. It's going to get you reacting and not thinking, not reasoning. What is the best approach here? You're just going to say, I'm going to rip their head off. That is not what is good for nations or individuals. So all the more reason we need to have restraint. We need to think it through ahead of time. And we need to be strategic so that we get their attention. We let the enemy know, and sadly, there are enemies in the world. Christ calls us to love our enemies. One of the best ways, I believe, to love our enemies is always to bring the truth. And the truth is, no nation has the right to just wantonly come in and destroy another. And if we're reminding people of that, hopefully they'll come to their senses. But if we pound them into the ground, to the dust, they're going to have resentment. And I think that's in many ways what's happened in the Middle East over more than my lifetime is the restraint has been not present. And so it's like annihilate them, and then they try to annihilate us, and it's just back and forth. And that escalation is harmful to humanity. It's harmful to all of us. And people talk about a third world war. It can happen. We've seen it happen in history. It really doesn't take much to be that final spark. And if we look at those historic moments, the restraint goes away because people are pissed.
Yeah, well said, Bishop.
Because you want more, and I want to give it to you. I'm rolling out a brand new membership program for the insiders of this channel. Join today. There's something for everyone. And because you could help me fund the next documentary film, the next book project, audio drama, audio narrations, and other projects that I have been dreaming to work on, but simply don't have the resources to accomplish. You and I together can do amazing things. You want more, and I want to give it to you.
And I want to ask you about His Eminence Pizzaballa. What have you thought about his efforts to sort of raise awareness about the suffering? This has been one of those carte blanche issues that we have with Israel. They have indiscriminately attacked civilians in this conflict. In their effort to get back their kidnapped citizens, Christians have been killed by snipers, their churches bombed, the starvation, etc. So what do you think about His Eminence Cardinal Pizzaballa raising the awareness?
Well, I think he's acting like a successor of the apostles and speaking the voice of reason, the voice of the truth that's been revealed to the Holy Catholic Church, and to really urge leaders and everyone. What I think Archbishop Pizzaballa really reminds us of is that need for restraint, and to remember all of us are created by God in God's image and likeness. It's so easy to forget, especially when power gets in the way, or money. Power and money together becomes a toxic mix, and people's lives are just run rampant over them. And we see that happening. I mean, you can look through history, and so many times the families, the women and children, the innocent, the elderly, those are the ones who suffer the most. And I think what Pizzaballa is a good reminder of is what he's trying to do, even as he offered himself as a hostage. I mean, that is the kind of language that I love to hear from my fellow bishops, to be men who are strong and willing to follow Christ in whatever sacrifice is necessary. But I think the important principle that is there that he has reminded us of is the innocent must be cared for. And if world leaders, if those who are making the decisions in these battles and all these attacks, everything that's going on, if they keep in mind their citizens, they're the beloved people that they're supposed to be protecting, then I believe that will always bring in that restraint we already talked about. If it's going to threaten those we're trying to protect through this military action, then what's the point? What are we doing? And I think it exposes that too often it's not the good of the people of the United States, of Israel, or whatever. It's the money, it's the power, it's some other influence that usually is not very good, that is really at the root of the decisions that are being made, rather than saying, we want a peaceful world for all people to flourish in. That's what Christ is about. He's the Prince of Peace. And a lot of people would say, oh, how naive, or how unplugged from the realities. But really, if we think about it, the realities of atrocities that have happened through history come from men and women, probably mostly men, but women are there too, very often. But human beings making decisions that destroy the lives of others for their own purposes of gaining wealth or gaining power or gaining influence, when they've forgotten the very people that very often, like in our nation, they've taken an oath to care for. That is easily forgotten. And like we talked about, I mean, I don't claim to be able to control my emotions as well as I would like in the heat of the moment. So that's why I think that Bishop Pizzaballa was significant in speaking up. He wasn't really paid much attention to, but if there were more voices and more clarity of shepherds, today's successors of the apostles, really speaking in terms of Christ and not just either staying silent or even supporting the things that are going on, we would be serving the church and the world as successors of the apostles of Jesus Christ in a much more significant way.
How did you feel when Donald Trump hosted Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu in the White House, and he talked about trying to relocate all the Gaza citizens some other place so that they could take the land and redevelop it? I mean, they joked about the Riviera of the Mediterranean. I was uncomfortable with that. I felt like that was not the right move. But what did you think?
Well, I was uncomfortable as well, Joe. And again, I don't claim to know the intricacies of what he and his administration are dealing with. But, there are different people that say, well, that's just how Trump operates. He says something rather outlandish to kind of get people's attention. Well, that works. But, sometimes he doesn't back off from the outlandish as much as I would be more comfortable with. And I'm not sure that is, honestly, in my judgment, it's kind of playing fast and loose with people's lives again, and with critical issues where, saying things like he said, thankfully it was just sort of taken as, well, this is Trump talking. But it could have sparked further violence or further attacks. I think you have to be very judicious about what you say in the kind of position that President Trump has. But he seems, I mean, I think ultimately his DNA is a businessman, and he's willing to say, things that sort of get his opponents or the buyers or whoever he's negotiating with. He likes to get their attention, and sometimes it works. But I think that when it comes to statescraft, as they say, I would encourage great care there, because you're dealing with the lives of innocent people.
Man, well said. We're down to the wire now. Just about a minute and a half left to go. Do you think the Vatican ought to be more involved in the conflict in the Middle East? Again, Christendom should regulate these two siblings and their rivalries, but someone needs to be the adult in the room. I think God designed that to be Christianity. What say you?
Yeah, I think in the past, that's what the diplomatic corps of the Vatican is really, what its roots are and what it's been about in history. It is helping to negotiate these kinds of things as a third party that, again, is interested in humanity and interested in the innocent. I think the Vatican does need to play a greater role.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.